Hey, Andy, good to see you. How are you?
Hey, how's it going, Doug? I was just making some lunch. What's going on?
Hey, I'm all right, Daniel. How are you?
Pretty good. How are things? Good?
Yeah, all great.
Excellent.
Let's see.
Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire, it's so delightful. Since we've no place to go.
Sheldon, how are you, sir?
Doing great. How you doing?
All right, all right. Hadn't seen you in a bit. How you been?
Doing well. Just trying to get back in the swing of things since yeah, it's all good.
All right.
FYI, I'm gonna have to be listen only mode today since I have to head out, but I'm listening.
Hey, no worries. Well, hey, Adam, how are you, sir?
Fantastic. How about yourself, Doug?
Doing good, doing good. We got a little Christmas music in the background here to cheer everybody up here. Hey, Mark, hadn't seen you in a bit, man.
Oh, hey, Doug. Yeah, it's been a while. How you doing?
I'm doing good, doing good.
Excellent.
You still moving full speed ahead?
Yeah, that's what's had me off the mark as of late. Been dealing with the pitching and yawing of the due diligence. Was looking good.
Well, very good, very good. Has the seller behaved herself?
You know, it's funny. Everything you guys say is true. You know, like the foot coming off the accelerator.
Yeah.
I said, oh, come on, that's just hogwash. Yeah, so it's been dynamic, but the business is solid. The seller is, yeah, she's good people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I've said it before, and I think it is a real and present possibility that kind of like for all of us who have bought and sold homes for our families, there's a place and time you you want to move, you need to move, you got a reason to move, but you're really feeling connected to the old place and you really struggle to think about moving. And but inevitably, if you move forward, there's a time and place where all of a sudden there's this cut on how you felt about the one you're selling, and now you're excited to move into the one you're buying. And
Hmm.
I think the same thing happens with sellers. I think they've got a lot of anxiety about giving up and moving on, and there's probably a lot of layers of that we could talk about. But at some point, I think they make that cut, and all of a sudden, it's I can't get out of here fast enough.
Yeah.
And we occasionally get the question about seller retention in the transition arrangement. And sometimes people ask questions like, "Oh, I need them there for a year," and it's like, "No, you're not going to want them there for a year."
Yeah. I know you got an agenda, but I have to say that the broker conversation we had a few calls ago, and the variation of the quality and acumen of brokers is a big deal. You had a broker on the call not too long ago,
Yeah.
and I wish I had that guy on my deal right now.
Yeah.
100%. Like the preparation for the seller for what they need to be like. How many times do you sell a multi-million-dollar business? Like a couple of times, right? She's never been through it before, and she's not prepared for some of the conversations and challenges that are coming up. And so I'm playing like relationship builder from a buyer perspective, but tough messenger from a broker perspective. And I really need that guy right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes a big difference.
Well, You're right. We've touched on this before, and the gentleman that was with us, he's with Viking Brokers, and that's not the exact name. It's Viking. Now I'm drawing a blank, but anyway, they have proven to be one of the more effective business brokered teams that we've worked with, and they are national, but they're not as they don't try to propagate like a Trans World or a Sunbelt or one of those outfits where they'll sell a franchise license to just about anybody that shows up.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, not to, I really don't want to try to sound disparaging, but I've had 2 discussions in the last 48 hours with people who had an absolutely horrific experience working with Trans World.
Really.
And I won't go into all the details, but it was just totally unrelated, two different situations. And it's tough. I mean, you're right. When the broker can't really bring value to the moment, it makes it that much harder to do.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I think we'll go ahead and officially launch this cruise today. I said in our message leading up to this, today is going to be a little more informal, perhaps than even many of our times. But I think we are kind of sailing into the holidays here, and everybody's got different ways that they celebrate and different things they do. And I know I've already gotten word on a lot of people that have already effectively gone offline for the holidays. But I did want to just kind of start by opening up the mic and getting updates from any others on how your journey may be going, and just share with the group some of the experiences you've had. Adam, do you mind updating?
Well, as far as where I'm right now, Allie and I working with the cabinet broker I mentioned, or the broker with the cabinet opportunity I mentioned last week. We expected to hear back at the end of the week on the status of our IOI. Haven't heard anything as of this morning before I got on the flight, and I just arrived back here in Jersey. Overall, I'm optimistic about the increased deal flow that we've seen in the last month and a half in the New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. And I look forward to seeing something move ahead aggressively earlier in the year.
Nice. Very good. Very good. Daniel, do you have any kind of update you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think so far with the electrical service business up in Tampa, we're doing our due diligence right now, and we have most of the materials. Looks like the QOV will be done January 6th. So that's great. So far, so good. I'm liking what I'm seeing. I'm liking what I'm hearing from the seller. I've been going through some of the banking statements, general ledger, just different things of it. It's not a super sophisticated business from their organization stand. They're a little bit, their books are a little bit messy, but I think we can make this work. So I'm very curious to see what Acquira really thinks about it once they have all the numbers in. But yeah, things are rolling along. So, and I'm having conversations with the seller every week. So things are going good.
Right. Great. Well, as you do get your data accumulated there, when you think you're ready, give me a shout and we'll talk about setting you up with the investment committee review. And but you and I can do a one-on-one prepping for that if you when you do get ready.
Thank you.
Carl, welcome. Any updates from your end? Carl, can you hear me okay?
Hey, sorry about that. Also, I'm unmuted. No, I had a couple. We're looking at a couple. South Florida has proven to be challenging. And, you know, it's odd that you mentioned about the Trans World. I was working with, I think I was talking to 2 separate brokers on 2 different jobs there. And just honestly, you got frustrating getting through the brokers. One of them seemed promising. I had a question. I'm pretty sure I know the answer. One of the things that was up front that the broker was very upfront about was that the acquisition would require, I want to say you said 800,000 in capital injection. Now I'm assuming that just means essentially, it sounded like it's after the purchase, the seller is essentially going to take all the capital out of the business, and it's going to require additional investment from the purchaser, after closing. Am I correct in that?
Well, I think that might be related to the classic question of how much working capital does the business require?
Right.
And what inevitably we run into is a very rudimentary and fundamentally wrong conclusion by sellers, and sometimes the brokers don't even help this. And that is, a seller sitting there looking at his business bank account and says, I got $1 million in the bank. I'm going to take that with me. Plus, you're going to pay me X for the business. And it's like, whoa, no. There's there's a trade-off there. And if any portion or all of that cash in the bank represents the working capital that's required, there has to be an understanding that that's an element that is factored into the purchase price. And if you take it all away, then the purchase price drops by X dollars. And usually it's a dollar for dollar exchange there.
Okay. That's how I took it. So I need to have another discussion with that broker.
Yeah.
It sounded basically, here's the purchase price, and then after, on top of that, you're going to have to inject this much capital into the business to essentially keep it running, which to me sounded like, again, like you just said, the seller is going to drain out the bank account. Then you're on the hook. So that was a bit of a red flag right off the bat.
And
that broker.
And that's why we often, in kind of the templated LOI we try to identify some level of working capital based on whatever calculations we can get in the SIM or through the broker, so that we can kind of set the expectations that, this purchase price includes a consideration for X dollars of working capital that's going to stay in the business.
Right.
And I can't tell you how many times we've had the discussion that brokers don't always understand that, and sellers hardly ever understand that. Because again, they, on really simple terms, they're looking at cash in the bank like, oh, that'll be mine when I sell.
So
No.
I mean, external feedback is something, if I'm getting this communication from a broker right off the bat, essentially maybe don't get too discouraged. This is something that we hash out later on in the deal.
Well, yes, correct. And fundamentally, when one of these sales is coming together, potentially, I'm a firm believer everything is negotiable.
Yep.
So mechanically, how you paper the deal, what terms and conditions you put into it, pretty much every line item is negotiable. But what I'm saying, there is no doubt that there's often a challenge, and the two areas I always lean to, it's working capital is sometimes very hard to get across and make people understand, and likewise work in progress. If the company has a notion of a good size work in progress, and that's typically, certainly for construction companies, it's that way. Cabinet manufacturers have it. Anybody that's project based, you're going to have some notion of work in progress at play. And what you have to do is come up with some definition of how you're going to score that. Money that was paid pre-close for deposits on projects may or may not offset expenses that have actually been incurred. And if there's some portion of work that hasn't been done yet and it's going to happen after closing, you don't want to be the buyer holding the bag to make payroll and buy supplies on a project you're not going to get any money for.
Right.
So you've got to do some kind of a spreadsheet of those projects, where they stand, how the money has been applied, what's due and pending in terms of receivables and payables, and line all that out. And we often do see in the purchase agreements, we see a pretty detailed WIP schedule as an attachment. And when the work actually starts happening after closing, you go line for line through that schedule and you say, all right, yes, this happened. Mr. Seller, here's a check for 10 grand that we just collected, but it was your work, so it's yours. Or, hey, here's a check, but it's mine because we did all the work after closing. So those two areas, though, working capital and work in progress, are often the really meaningful bogeys that'll blow up your cash flow.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, I mean, my only other note to myself is, if I'm honest with myself, I've been busy couple months here, closing up the year on the work end. So I need to, come the start of the year, new reset, and kind of clamp back down again.
Yeah.
It's been a fairly rocky end of the year on the day job. So
Yeah. Well, and that's a reality for all you guys that still are holding on to your W-2 jobs. Inevitably, December is a culmination. It's not only month end, it's a quarter end, and it's a year end for a lot of people. And that always translates into frenzies of activity and extra hours to close the books for all of those periods. And as an old banker, I hated December. I just really hated December. It always meant I never got any time off for Christmas or New Year's. That was number one, and that was true for 20 years. But on top of that, it was a whole lot of extra work that also meant more time away from family. But anyway, you pick your poison, right? Anybody have any other updates on deals or deal flow you're working with or looking at before we get into our other topic? Let's see, who else? Puneet, you have anything, sir, that you'd like to share with the group?
Sure. I just had a few calls, two of which I declined to move forward with. One was an executive coaching business, and it just didn't seem right. All the sets of franchise fees and me having to build the business up as a master franchisor. The second I was excited about until I looked at this massive ability to manage part-time payroll, which is a test prep and tutoring center, which I basically said, oh, okay, if I look at all your staff, there's 300,000 in payroll, but then you've got another 700,000 in payroll. Where's that coming from? And it's effectively 35 part-time teachers, and you can't balance scheduling. If someone's sitting there and a parent cancels, you're paying the person for no. So I just said, have you used AI to optimize that in scheduling? And they said, no, we've been struggling with this. I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
The one I'm really inclined right now. I've got a call with the pain management clinic to go buy out. And so the two physicians would stay on board and then be employees, potentially retaining equity. That's super interesting. And I've also just started asking for some SIMs for durable medical equipment. But I think I'm really getting intrigued by medical practices and taking advice. I'll just say this with a grain of salt from who I speak with. I spoke to a guy that's bought and sold multiple medical practices, but he's on an economic level that's up here, which has taken companies public for $4 billion. He's probably worth a few $100 million. And he said, why are you wasting your time with that? He's like, it's easy for someone like that to say that, right?
Yeah.
Like, why are you, he's like, how much do you want to walk away with after 5 years? And I was just throwing out, I just said, I'd love to walk away with 5 or 10. And he said, but those are nice numbers. But if you really want to walk away with the 50, 60, $100 million, go start an AI business with healthcare with my tech background. And you kind of take that with a grain of salt. You're in a different economic stratosphere than me, so that that knowledge doesn't apply with. I appreciate it. So it was just it shook me because I spoke to him on Saturday morning and I almost went as a yo-yo. I'm like, oh, why am I doing this? And then I took a step back and saying, I need to buy this business for me, not for him. Number one. Number two is, with no background as a physician myself, I'm effectively buying myself into the healthcare field and then having an opportunity to optimize a practice with AI, use mental and digital health subscriptions, and then continue to roll that. So now I've just developed domain expertise by buying myself in, which is the other lens of how I look at this. So it kind of just made me think, like, take everything that everyone says with a grain of salt and then look at where they're coming from. If you've got someone that's worth that much, of course they're not going to waste the next 5 years of their life for 10 million.
Yeah.
For me,
Yeah.
that's meaningful. So it was just a lesson learned, is my update.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're spot on. You do have to take all that so-called advice with a grain of salt, and most of those guys that have reached that stratosphere are going to have some very biased opinions on how the world works. In one of my enterprises a number of years ago, I attracted an investor who was, I think, executive number 5 in the original Blockbuster video game. I don't know how many of you lived or know the Blockbuster story, but that company got sold about 3 times. And last guy holding the bag, really took a bath. But through the first sale, this particular individual that was an investor in my business had made about 130 or 40 million was his payday on that first buyout. And what he was doing as a business, he was willing to be a private investor in companies, but he had $100,000 cap. He would write you a term sheet for his 100,000, but his proviso was, don't ever call me for another dime. That was number one. And keep me posted on how you're doing. That was fundamentally number 2. Nothing real formal. But when you do the math on that, even if he lost 100,000 on my deal, that's a tax write-off to him and his business, and he's got a just on the principal. The income he's earning on his investments on that 130 million, he's paying a big tax bill every year. So offsetting it with a 5%. Oh, and that 100,000 represented a 5% equity stake in whatever I had going on. So it was great terms for me. And he was just a really unique guy, but at that stratosphere, again, it was monopoly money to him. It really didn't mean a whole lot, and he didn't waste a lot of brain cells, managing it and worrying about it and moving on with it. So he was a great guy to have on the investment stack, that's for sure, because he fundamentally didn't care. But anyway, all right. Well, I threw up an idea. This is something in my own coaching practice. This is something I've embraced and adopted for a while now. It happened to coincidentally come back on my radar about 2 weeks ago. This idea of, instead of making a New Year resolution, what if you pick a word for the year that would be your mantra for the whole new year? Anybody heard? I'll start by asking, has anybody heard of that idea before? Anybody doing that idea?
Yeah, I know my church has the concept of star words that our new pastor began as a process about 2 years ago.
And what is that, Adam? Explain that a little bit for us.
So the first year, she provided a list, like 100 words, and you just picked a number at random, and then someone would tell you what that word was, and that was your word for the year. I guess mine was imagine. And then the next year they made it automated online. So you could just go to a website and just it would pick a word at random for you. And the idea is that you would think about that word and how to apply it in your life during the year.
Nice, nice. Well, same concept as that. And I've had clients, I've known people, I've got colleagues and friends. I'm in a small community of professional coaches that we meet once a month, and we were talking about it. That was one of the ways it came back on my radar recently. And people talk about, like, well, you sit down with your spouse and you try to have a discussion, and maybe you come up with a word as a household of what you would like to represent or what you could do, or you do it specifically for any business initiatives. But I think ultimately it comes down to, I like the idea of picking it more on a very personal level. What do you want to be about in the new year? Is there a rally cry, a theme, or an idea that could make sense for you as you go forward in what you're doing? And I wanted to share that with the group here because I think sometimes I fancy myself the executive coach who worries more about common sense answers to things, nothing elaborate, nothing over engineered. I call my podcast Leadership Powered by Common Sense, and that's what we inevitably end up talking about. It's just some really straightforward ideas. And when you think about a mantra or a vision statement or a purpose for a year, if you can boil it down to one word, that's pretty powerful. So Adam, let me come back to you. As your friends at your church have done this, any stories you've heard people talk about as an outcome?
No, not specifically. I don't think it was any process, good or bad, about follow up to see what the outcomes were at the individual level.
Yeah. Well, it's just I think it is a unique idea with a lot more upside than the traditional even trying to make resolutions. And before I totally dismiss or write off the resolution idea, anybody have success in doing that in your own life right now? I mean, do you make New Year resolutions? Anybody?
No, Doug, this year's been a resolution.
There you
I
go.
think everyone here has made a choice to make some significant changes in how they approach a life. So, but yeah, no, nothing specific to that. But I think your idea is pretty cool.
Yeah. It's well, in full transparency and honest disclosure here, I'm still working on what I may want to pick for mine for the new year. My wife and I are supposed to take a little time off, and I'll probably finalize it with her as we go forward. But I've got a couple of ideas I'm noodling on, but I'm not gonna share what those are until I get closer to the final answer. But I think it is a good idea and worth thinking about because what I will tell you, one of the key words that I've used a lot with my coaching clients, I think it's very important in this crazy busy world we all live in, that as you go through your day-to-day effort, and I've talked about this before here, I think the key word is being intentional. You need to try to be very intentional about how you're burning your daylight, because otherwise you can go to bed or go to sleep on Sunday night and you look back on the week and you go, gosh, I didn't get a whole lot done this week. I was busy, but was it really meaningful? Did I really accomplish any of my goals? Did I make any progress? And Mark, I go back to something you encouraged the group with a couple of months ago. You talked about the idea of assuming that CEO role and creating that CEO mindset for yourself, even way before you know the business you're going to buy. But, really manage your time, manage your effort, and really begin that process of thinking like a CEO.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's funny. I had a word already selected, Doug, for your exercise today,
Okay.
and I've heard it twice so far. So I feel like I need another one. You just said it. Puneet said it earlier. But I'll just jump in. Mine is meaningful for 2025. And I do think that this year, so I made the call to hang up the W-2 and pursue this full time this year because I've been here before, and the allure, the safety of that biweekly cash infusion has had me walk away from doing this. So I burned the bridge on this one here. But one of the things I've often noticed is that when you ask someone what they do, they'll tell you what they are, right? Pilots don't say I do flight. They say I am a pilot. I am a doctor, right? And so, for me, I want that what I am to be meaningful, and being an entrepreneur, being a business owner is meaningful to me. I'm looking at my inbox on my email. I still have headhunters calling me to get back into the W-2 game. And I have job postings that just come my way just for whatever platforms I'm on. I don't turn them off because I want to be reminded that that's not something I want to do. So I see VP this, VP that. None of that is more meaningful to me than being my own business owner, entrepreneur. So that's what the word is for me. And I didn't say much about the business with the deals going on right now, but I had a conversation with the seller this morning for my business, and I got the November numbers, and I'm like, hey, your gross margin's off by 3, your cost of goods is up by 2, like you're going in the wrong direction. And she said, Mark, hey, look, I'm going to stop you there. I don't do the numbers. That's my finance guy. I don't do the numbers. I just make this place work. And there was something really kind of elegant about that. Like, she's not a business person running an 8-figure business and doesn't understand the finance but she knows her customers, she knows her employees, she knows her products. And this is a purity to some of these sellers out there. And I find that they're really, really good people. And I think that they have found meaning in what they do. And I'm, kind of anxious to take it over and take it to the next level.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Mark. And it reminds me, and I'll share with everybody a quick story and this goes back a ways. Some of you might not have, all of you were definitely alive, but you were in different places in life to remember this perhaps, or remember it in different ways. And I'm talking about the 2008 financial crash that happened. And I had to close a business because of it, because it was related to the mortgage finance industry, and mortgage lending was ground zero for the crash, if you remember the gory details. But it permeated a lot more of the economy. But long story short, I got involved. I saw a need, and my entrepreneurial juices were flowing. I actually created a nonprofit organization to coach and help job seekers who, most of them, for the first time in their life, had been given a pink slip. And these were a lot of them were long tenured professionals. And to your point, Mark, what I discovered quickly, you walk up to somebody that was coming to join and take part in our programming. I would say, tell me something about yourself, and they would immediately launch into, well, I'm an engineer, or I'm an architect, or I'm a pilot, or I'm a whatever. And I quickly got to the point of getting a little brazen when I worded my question exactly this way. I would say, tell me something about yourself. And they inevitably, if they started down that path, well, I'm a this or I'm a that, I would go, stop. That's not what I asked you. And word got out that don't talk to Doug. He's going to ask you that question, you know. Or if you talk to Doug, be ready. He's going to ask you that question. But a lot of what we did, though, in our training and counseling for these folks was to help people get re-grounded in what they really believed in. You know, what did they think of as the right kind of life they wanted to live, and the job was to be secondary to fulfilling that meaning. And we did a lot of work on that, and we even created a whole 6-step program. The first 3 steps were work toward redefining who and what you were before you ever started thinking about a resume or looking for a job. And I do think there are a lot of corollaries here in this idea to make a life-changing decision to move forward with entrepreneurship, leaving a W-2 environment.
Yeah, that's a great story. And I look to, so everyone here, like when you're asked that question going forward, you can now say, I create, I inspire, right? I influence, I lead, which is a different ball of wax altogether. So that's my thoughts.
Well, and specific to the journey here, the other thing I will add as a point of encouragement to you guys, and I think I've talked to 1 or 2 of you recently about this, I think it's important to set your own mindset as you're going to be an investor in these businesses, not an operator of the business. Now, does that mean on day 1 you get to abandon all aspects of operation? No, you need to be ready to, you know, stand in and go in and learn everything you might need to learn about the operation. But don't be doing that with the idea, I'm going to take over running this on a day-to-day basis. That's unless it is truly an acquisition that you would count as a true lifestyle business for you to be doing that every day. And Puneet, I think your example is a good one. It's more of being an investor in those medical practices and leveraging some of the expertise you've got that you could bring to change the model for, you know, a new normal. That's great, but again, you're doing that more as an investor rather than an operator. So I think that's an important element. Anybody got any other thoughts along that line or questions you'd like to ask?
I guess that makes me think of when you, in the last week's session, Doug, you talked about the art versus the science of doing things, right? And so I listened to your comment about not being an operator, and I go, well, the science says get a general manager in there and they're operating the business, so I'm good. But is there a certain art of that as well? I mean, once you get the GM in there, are there certain pitholes or pitfalls that you might fall into? Because even though you're not the GM, you're thinking more like an operator, or the things we should watch out for?
Yeah, my great question, Adam, and my quick answer is yes. The art form still comes in the fact that with these smaller businesses, you're going to be much closer to the people that are executing on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
And not just your employees or your contractors, but the customers they're serving.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be a lot closer to that than you would be if you were in your, you know, bigger Fortune 1000 corporate gig.
Mm-hmm.
In most of those really large corporate and W-2 type settings, not everybody is real close to certainly not close to the customers. And some of them are pretty well isolated from the rest of the people that make the business work.
Mm-hmm.
But in these businesses, when you're talking purchase price at 5 million or less in that arena, you're going to be elbow to elbow with the people that are making it happen and the customers you're going to serve.
Mhm.
So that's where there's a lot more art form, to use my words. There's a lot more art form to those relationships, building and maintaining those relationships. We have had, and I'm sad to report this, but it has been talked about. We have had a couple of AEs that have, quite candidly, they've struggled with the people side of their businesses. They didn't really assess individuals quite as well as they could have or should have. Employees they inherited proved to be problem children that needed to be dealt with, and the new owner may or may not have had a propensity or a tolerance for working with that properly.
Wow.
So either they let the problem linger too long and fester in the business and really adversely affect things, or they move quickly but don't have an alternative solution on how to maintain that.
Gotcha.
So
Thanks.
that and that's part of why we really stress in the due diligence part the whole idea of getting a good handle on your skills matrix and your people that are on the team, not just a roster of who gets a paycheck, but what do they do? What to use Mark's word, what meaning do they bring to the business, and what do they really represent on the payroll?
Great. Thanks.
It's really important to lean into some of that and understand it too. All right. Anybody else? Well, I'll tell you then, with that, I'm going to wrap this up. I want to wish everybody a great and Merry Christmas or a happy holiday, whatever you may celebrate. And we will not have another AP call until January 6th. So technically, well, I guess it is the first Monday in January because first is on a Tuesday, right? So, yeah. Yep. All right. We'll see everybody then. Have a great holiday.
Thanks, Doug.